Hi, I'm Robert SanGeorge, as it says on the screen, and my day job is that I'm a career advisor for graduate students in the School of Public Affairs. This presentation is designed primarily for graduate students. I do believe seniors could benefit from it if there are some seniors listening. We would appreciate it if you would tell us in the chat, as a couple of people already have, where you heard about this webinar, because we are in an eternal struggle to figure out how to best reach students. And as you might imagine, email is not necessarily the best way. So thanks very much. I can see already a bunch of you are answering. Much appreciate your answers to that. It helps us do our job better in terms of making sure people know that these sorts of things are happening. So we are going to talk about resumes for graduate students and how to make the best impact. And because they are different than, say, for example, the kind of resume a sophomore might have. And it's not just because you're older and probably have more experience and you've taken a lot more courses than someone who is 4 or 5 years or 8 years or whatever younger than you. So I'm a believer in telling people what we are going to talk about. We're going to talk about resume formatting, about how you should be reviewing your skill set with a forward look as to what it is you want to be, why graduate student resumes are different in the first place, where should you put the education section on your resume, on the top or on the bottom. There's no hard and fast rule. It depends to a large degree on how much experience you have and a number of other things. Should there be a relevant coursework section? That probably depends on how much work or internship experience you have as to whether you need to bulk up your resume with a section right under the education section with a bunch of bullet points that list relevant courses you're taking. Also, we're going to talk about something called the professional skills profile in your resume. And that means a bullet-pointed list of your most important skills relevant to and customized for a specific employer that you are about to send to which you're about to send your application. We're also going to talk about how you don't have to be totally bound to what I like to describe as the tyranny of reverse chronology. In other words, your most recent job first, and then or internship, and then the second most recent and third most recent. There's a way to break that up, and I'll discuss that. What about a section on leadership and activities? What should you do with that? Should you have it? Probably depends on how long your resume is already. Also, resumes for applicant tracking systems. This is when you look at a job application, a job posting, and the posting says, click here to apply, and you find yourself inside an employer's own application system. More on that to come. So let's dive in. First of all, formatting. Understand and put yourself in the position of somebody working for an employer, usually quite junior, by the way, who is told, go to that email address, jobs@ouroffice.com, okay? And go through we got about 100 resumes there, and go through them. And what we want you to do is narrow it down to maybe a dozen that we will take a closer look at. And of that, maybe we'll interview 5 people. That's kind of the way it works. How do these people like to skim those resumes at 100 miles an hour? They want to skim down the left side of the page. And that's the biggest reason why we strongly suggest that you use bullet points when you're describing aspects of what you've done in terms of internships and jobs. And you should be using a modern looking font. Generally, they're called sans serif. In French, that means without serif, which probably doesn't mean anything to you. But the sans serif fonts, the main ones, are Calibri, Trebuchet, and Tahoma. And you should be using the same font throughout the resume. Don't start messing around with different fonts in different places. I don't care what kind of template that you got from Microsoft or off the internet or whatever. You need to use the same font throughout the resume. And that same font should be the font that you use for your cover letter. And the font size should not vary tremendously. Your name at the top might be size 14 or 16 font, okay? Generally, the font in a resume should be somewhere between size 10 and 12. Again, depending on the content, don't use a font size smaller than 10. It will make it hard for people to read. And take this from a middle-aged person. When a middle-aged person is reading something that small, even with glasses, they're going to have a hard time reading it. And when they're annoyed, it doesn't put them in a good mood for reading your resume, okay? Don't use colors in your resume. I mean, you can a little bit. You know, I've seen people make their headings, you know, education, experience, blue instead of black or something. But don't start splashing color all over the resume and putting color as backgrounds in the resume. It should have a white background, basically with black lettering, and maybe the headers have a somewhat different color, maybe, but that's not really even necessary. Don't put any narrative text at the top. You know, something like energetic and upbeat graduate student seeks certain kind of job and willing to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. You know, don't do that stuff. If anything, it belongs in a cover letter, and it probably doesn't even belong there because most of those narratives that I've seen at the top are over the top and they're just too much, and they're not really going to help you get a job or an internship for that matter. Now, aside from the formatting, what do you need to do when you're looking at your resume? I mean, you probably all have resumes already, so you're not working from a blank document. But you need to closely review your skill set, particularly for what kind of skills employers will want in the fields to which you are applying. But in general, you should be looking at your skill set. And you see the list there, ranging from, you know, research and analytic skills to any foreign languages you might speak, or experience studying or working abroad, grant writing and research, relevant volunteer experience you've had, etc. Okay. And by the way, a lot of this kind of information should be in the resume, even if it's not 100% relevant to the job. For example, if you speak a foreign language, you probably should mention that anyway, because not very many Americans do. And most employers are impressed that someone speaks a foreign language, even though they don't really care whether you speak it for that job. Okay. And by the way, you know, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. And someone already has asked a question, and I'm going to get to that in a second. Feel free to ask a question in the Q&A or in the chat at any time, and I'll be happy to respond. So the first question is, so you shouldn't have a summary narrative at the top of your experience? No, you should not. It doesn't help you. And what it does is it pushes everything else down, and employers tend not to read it. You want to start right off the bat, either with your education or your experience, and we're going to talk about how to make that decision in a moment. Those narratives of 1 or 2 or 3 sentences or worse, even longer than that, don't belong there. Resumes are documents that should be able to be skimmed pretty easily, and mini narratives, wherever they appear in the resume, should not be there, basically. So let's keep going. Why and how are graduate resumes? First of all, graduate student resumes. Depending on how much experience you've got, your resume might be up to 2 pages long, although it depends on the kind of job you're applying for. If you're applying to a management consulting firm for a job, it's kind of a religion with them that resumes are 1 page. Don't try to give them a resume that's more than 1 page. The Grad Business School at AU, for people who are applying to business sector jobs, generally tell people, again, almost like it's part of some kind of 10 commandments of business resumes, got to be 1 page long. However, there are circumstances when grad students applying for specific jobs in the nonprofit sector, for example, even in government, your resume can go over a page, but don't have it just go over 3 lines. Because here's what happens, and I've heard employers say this. They look at a resume and they see that it spills over 3 or 4 or 5 lines onto a second page, and they say to themselves, oh, he wasn't disciplined enough to keep it to a page. I've heard those exact words. Whereas if you go a page and a half, they don't even think that. They think, well, he had enough content to justify going that long. Okay. I see we have another question. When is it acceptable for your resume to be longer than one page? Well, I'm sort of explaining that right now. I was always told resume should be no more than one page. Here's the thing. If you are a senior, 90% of seniors, maybe even more than that, should have one-page resumes. Employers expect it to be a page long. If you have had limited work experience, then you should almost certainly be keeping your resume to one page. The shorter the resume is, within reason, the more likely it is to be completely read. That's for sure. However, I've seen graduate students with some pretty impressive resumes, people who have been in the job world for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and now they're getting a graduate degree, and they've got a lot of good things to say about themselves, and particularly saying things that could well be relevant to the whatever sorts of jobs they intend to be applying for. So that's why I'm saying that under certain circumstances, going over a page is okay. Person says, I'm 48 and I have 25 years of work history. Used to work in the international NGO UN sector where we use CVs instead of resumes. Mine is 5 pages. A 5-page resume is a big mistake in the United States. And when you call, well, let's talk about the difference between resumes and CVs. I've worked a major part of my life abroad, about half my life. Outside the United States, the word resume is largely unknown. The word is CVs, okay, which stands for Latin curriculum vitae. I studied 4 years of French in high school to be able to know that. Don't worry about what that means. In the US, the word CV applies primarily to academic resumes. That is, people with advanced degrees, mostly PhDs, or people who are about to get a PhD, or they are what's known as all but dissertation. So they've done all their coursework toward a PhD and they're working on their dissertation. And they want to talk about the research papers and things like that. And those kinds of CVs, academic CVs in the United States, can go longer. But, and I'm responding now to the person who asked the question, unless you are applying for some kind of academic job and you want to be using a lot of publishing that you've done and things like that, sending a 5-page resume to an American employer is a huge mistake. I will tell you that before I came to AU, I was a senior executive for about 25 years, mostly in Europe. And my resume kept growing and growing and growing. Now, this is before I went into being a professional career advisor. And at a certain point, it was about 3.5 pages long. And I said to myself, who wants to read this? Really? Okay. And part of that was because I had a background early in my career as a professional writer. And I had a sense of how, as a professional writer, you detach yourself from what you're writing and look at it as if you're someone else. Okay. And I did that. And I said, this is too long. And I figured out a way to cut my resume down, even though I'd had a number of, I will say modestly, pretty impressive senior executive positions. And I spoke a number of languages and had a whole bunch of different skills. I cut it down to 2 pages. That was what I did, in the middle of my career. Okay. And when I say middle, I mean, I was really about as old as you are now, Nora. And it worked a lot better for me. And I will tell you that American employers, again, unless you're talking about either applying to a think tank, a research institution, which is, has some of the same ways that things that it wants to see on resumes as a university might want. Unless you're talking about that kind of job, I would definitely be cutting my resume down to 2 pages. Okay. I hope that's clear. Anyway, where was I now? Yeah, so resume could be up to 2 pages, could include a professional skills profile. More on that later, as I say there. You might include a relevant course work section, especially if you don't have much experience. I run into people, usually they are graduate students who have started graduate programs right out of undergrad school, undergrad, and maybe they went to a college or a university that was in a small town or a small city, and they didn't have much opportunity to do a lot of internships. And so under those circumstances, what I then do is we start working through the idea of, well, what relevant coursework can you talk about putting down in a separate section right under the education section? So it's pretty high up in the resume. And a couple of things about the relevant coursework section. No course numbers. Nobody cares about the fact that you took Government 457. They want to know what the name of the course was. Another tip, and I'm not telling you here to lie about it, but let's say you've got a pretty solid grounding in statistics, which can be important depending on the field you want to go into. And you took a course called Introduction to Statistics, and it was a great course, and you learned a lot, and you want to list it under relevant coursework. Don't call it Introduction to Statistics because, and I've heard this from employers, when they see something that says Introduction to, they disregard it. They assume, oh, it's just an introductory course. So just say statistics or statistical methodology, or figure out some way to describe it that stays true to the subject matter, but avoids using the term introduction, okay? And you're always going to want to include, and this is often going to be in the relevant coursework section, special skills you have, particularly quantitative skills, data science skills, and languages. And there may be some other things I'm not thinking of, but in particular, that's what I'm saying. Was another question here. Should I omit positions or descriptions? I'm not sure what you mean. You're going to have to expand on that question. Should you omit positions? Oh, you mean, should you omit some of your jobs? I see. The problem with that is then it may look like you went periods of time without being employed. And then that raises suspicions on the part of the employer. Well, you fired from that other job and you weren't able to get another job for 3 years, when in fact that may not be the case at all. The way to do it would be to just list a job, but only use one bullet point, or maybe even no bullet points, if the job title is self-explanatory, okay? If you were a research analyst for a certain kind of employer and it's kind of pretty obvious what it was you did, then maybe you don't need to explain in a lot of bullet points what that was all about, okay? Should we mention workshops or certificates we attended online? Yes, you should, particularly if they're relevant to the job or internship you're applying to, okay? Definitely. And you want to state it, you want to put it in the education section, and you want to state when it was you completed that certificate or workshop, okay? So it should look, in other words, most important, obviously, are your degrees. And on top is going to be, even if you haven't finished, I'm assuming most of you, or maybe all of you, are current graduate students. So the first thing in education is going to say American University, your school, the degree program you're in, and it should say expected graduation, May 2025 or whatever it is, all right? And if you have a concentration that is relevant to what you're applying for, you should say, in addition to the degree program, concentration in whatever, okay? Then you go to your undergraduate degree, and if you, for example, got some kind of a certification that required you to do some work, that is, academic type work, studying, you should list the name of the certificate and probably the month and year you received it, okay? So that's that. Let's see, I think we got more questions here. What if you have significant experience, but it was quite a bit in the past and your jobs in between haven't been as relevant, but you don't want to leave a gap? That is where you divide up, and I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask you to wait on that, because what I'm going to talk about is how you free yourself from having to list things in a precise reverse chronology. You start out in the experience section with relevant professional experience. And what's relevant? It's whatever's relevant for that particular position you're applying for. And then below it, you list additional work experience, and other stuff is there. So that, in other words, all your work experience is listed there, and anybody can figure out, hopefully, that there weren't any gaps and that you weren't unemployed for 2 years, assuming you weren't. But you don't have to list things that are not relevant way at the top, for example. You can call that additional work experience and put it lower than the relevant professional experience. Okay, more on that to come. Let's keep going. So where should you put your education section? It all depends on how much relevant experience you have. I've seen very impressive resumes from graduate students who have a ton of relevant experience, and putting their graduate degree at the top is probably something they don't need to do unless you are making a career transition. All right. So let's say you're a high school teacher and you got a lot of experience teaching high school for the last 10 years, and your resume screams, I'm a high school teacher. All right. Well, but you're getting a graduate degree in, let's say, a master's of public policy in the School of Public Affairs, and you want to become a policy analyst. So that's where I would list, even though you've got a lot of work experience, I would list the degree first, because the degree really tells the employer where you want to be going. And then you do need to list your job experience, however, and there are ways to massage that. And also, we could talk about putting a relevant coursework section in, or a professional skills profile in there. And I know it's getting a little confusing because I haven't explained it all in order yet, but we will get there. And by the way, if you're going to have a relevant coursework section, well, probably the education section should be at the top. I'm going to step back a little bit from what I said about that a year ago when I last gave this presentation. Probably the education section should be at the top if you're going to have relevant coursework, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And as I say here, also list relevant certificates for academic work you've done or training you've done. Don't list your graduate degree concentration. In other words, and I'm most familiar with School of Public Affairs, so I'm going to use their examples. Master of Public Administration, and your degree concentration is nonprofit management, okay? Well, if you're applying for a job that is not in the nonprofit sector, don't list that concentration. It will distract the employer, and it gives them a reason to say, oh, well, she concentrated on nonprofit management, so we don't want to hire her, okay? Don't give them any reason to want to toss your resume. And that means omitting stuff when necessary. And by the way, I've seen people do this. I've seen graduate students do this. Do not list your high school. It's ancient history, okay? Now, relevant coursework. It could be useful even if you have a lot of experience, but that's only a judgment that you should be making yourself and or in consultation with a career advisor, okay? As I said before, never ever use course numbers in describing the relevant coursework. One-line course titles or descriptions. Don't say something like, took this course, whatever the name of the course is, and then you get into bullet points about what the course covered as if it were a job. Don't do that. It's too much detail. And it's more detail than the employer is going to want to see in a relevant coursework session. I would say, generally speaking, list somewhere between 3 and 7 courses, 1 line each, black bullet points, okay? If you don't have much job experience or internship experience, okay? And you will change what is in that relevant coursework section depending on the job. And so you will need, every time you're going to apply for a job, you got to look at that relevant coursework section and say, okay, is this relevant to that job? Do I need to move the bullet points around? Do I need to take a couple out and put a couple of other courses in instead? What do I need to do with the relevant coursework section to make sure it's relevant to every particular job I'm applying to? I see we got more questions. On the high school question, what if your high school is very well regarded in the area, And if you are still involved as a board member, if you think that's important, fine. But my general advice is that if you're working on a graduate degree, that high school is ancient history. Okay. Look, the point of the way that a resume should look is that you are profiling yourself as someone who is getting a graduate degree, obviously. If you're close to graduation, that resume is basically saying about to get a graduate degree, all right? And also that you are a young professional, okay? And putting high school in there kind of conflicts with being a young professional. Now, if you're applying for a job in your old hometown and the high school really means something, who am I to say you shouldn't use it? But generally speaking, I would tell people not to do that. Okay. Any other questions right now? Nope. Let's keep going. Okay, a professional skills profile. What is this? This is something that may well be at the very top of your resume, even above education. It is designed to be a 2-column. And by the way, I want to go ahead. Let me just jump ahead for a moment here. Yes, I do show an example of what it's going to be. So in a moment, you're going to see an example of what it should look like. All right. It's an at-a-glance highlighting of your skills and experience, designed to be kind of a 20-second glance. Think of it as a teaser, as something that's meant to get an employer really interested. Oh, she's got this and that and this and that. Let's put her aside. I have actually heard employers say that when they see a good professional skills profile that is relevant to whatever job it is they're trying to fill, they may well put a resume aside for further review and put the candidate in a smaller grouping just on the basis of the skills profile. Okay. I recommend it be 2-column for a couple of reasons. It will force you to be much more concise in the way you describe a skill, and it'll be the only thing in the resume that is 2 columns, and so it will look different than the rest of the resume, and it will be bullet pointed. And the idea is it encourages the employer to read the rest of your resume. You're going to list things like software skills you have, language skills you have, certain kinds of experience. And as I say, preferably 1 line for each bullet point, and you try not to spill over. Now, let's look at what I mean by this. So look at this example. This was a real person that I advised a long time ago. So you see her name would be at the top, and street address and telephone number. And by the way, if you are looking for a job in the DC area, you need a DC area street address at the top of your resume. Now, if you want to protect your privacy and you don't want to list your private address, perfectly understandable, then use AU's address, 4400 Massachusetts Avenue, Washington, D.C. Okay, 4400 Massachusetts Avenue. But why do you need a real street address? Because you really want to make sure that employer understands that, and DC employer understands that you are local. Okay. There are a lot of people who are not local, who are trying to get jobs in DC, and they are at a huge disadvantage. Lucky for you being here in DC. Some of you may be, by the way, online students who are not in DC. And if that's the case, then I suggest that you try to use a DC address if you can, a friend, family, whatever. And if and when you get to an interview where they say, now, are you in Cleveland or are you in DC? And you're going to be honest with them and say, oh, well, I'm in Cleveland right now, but I'm about to move to the DC area. Okay, that's the way to do it. And the reason is, employers, generally speaking, for entry-level jobs and jobs that are a bit above entry level, which is what most grad students are going for, employers generally don't want to bother to recruit people who are outside the area because they don't need to. There are a lot of jobs in this area. This is a very robust job market in the DMV, but there's also a lot of candidates because there's, the 3 big schools, American and GW and Georgetown, and there's also the University of Maryland, which is a pretty big school in and of itself, and some smaller schools. So there is competition. It's it's solid competition, but you should be able to get a job. I mean, there's no excuse really, as long as you go about your job hunt in an intensive and focused way. So notice what this person has written here. All right. In this case, this was a woman, she spoke fluent Spanish and French, and that was relevant to the kind of jobs she was looking for. So that was the first bullet point on the left-hand side. Now, the strong research and analytical skills. Why is that? Well, it was important, obviously, for the job she was applying for. There was a survey done about, I think, 4 or 5 years ago by the Chronicle of Higher Education. Chronicle of Higher Education is the flagship publication of universities and colleges in the United States. They did a survey of more than 4,000 employers and asked them, what do you look for in recent college graduates? Now, mostly they were talking about people coming out with bachelor's degrees, but this applies to people with master's degrees, especially if you don't have a huge amount of in-between experience between your graduate degree and your undergraduate degree in terms of jobs. And what came out was 4 skills above all are most important for employers: research and analytical skills, okay, and written and oral communication. Now, this person chose to say research, analytical, and writing and didn't worry about the oral part, but you could make that 2 bullet points: strong research and analytical skills, so as not to use the word strong too often, excellent written and oral communication, something like that. Those are what most employers are looking for, even if it's not in the job description, okay? This woman also had some pretty solid data analytic experience, and you see that there with SPSS and Stata. She had some excellent experience abroad. She also had some unusual skills in design, using Adobe Photoshop, Dreamweaver, Microsoft Publisher, and a few other things there. She was applying for jobs with international development organizations that were involved with work trying to help women in poverty, again, people abroad, and through micro enterprises, but helping them found small businesses. And so that's why she had all that stuff there. And you can see how only one of those bullet points spilled over into a second line, okay? This is the way the skills profile should look. Underneath that would be education, and maybe underneath that, if necessary, would be relevant coursework or relevant studies, depending on what you want to call it. Honors could be there. Honors also probably actually should be under education. And that, whoops, I don't want to leave that yet. Go back. What happened here? Sorry, I'm going too far back. Now I got to go forward. There we are. So one other thing to note in the left-hand side toward the bottom, she listed relevant professional experience and then additional work experience of jobs that were less relevant, but she still wanted to list them because she wanted to show a continuous history of employment, okay? And if necessary, and in the case of this person, I don't think it was necessary. I think I've just added this myself. If you've got a section in your resume called leadership or activities, change the title. Employers see those words and they tend to just not read it, okay? I know, I've talked to them. What pushes the right buttons with them at the bottom of the resume, and remember, at the bottom of the resume, you're struggling to maintain their attention. You don't know that, but you are. Campus and community service is the way to describe stuff you've done, whether it's as a graduate student or an undergraduate. And also it could be involved, you could be involved with charitable work on or off campus. So it's campus and community or community and campus service, whatever. All right. That's kind of the way a resume should line up. Now, it's also possible that maybe, again, if you're a career transitioner and you want to show that the graduate degree you're getting is really relevant to what you want to be doing, maybe you still want education at the top and relevant coursework under that, and maybe then you'll put a professional skills profile like third on the resume. It could still be helpful that way. I want to, I know I've been skipping, I haven't been responding to questions, so I'm going to pause here for a moment. Do you think it's been hindering the job search if I've been applying using a Hyattsville, Maryland address? Probably not, unless you're applying in Northern Virginia, in which case it's kind of far. The only reason I know where Hyattsville is I had to go out there to get COVID vaccinations back in the days when they opened up the Six Flags amusement park, which I think is out in Hyattsville, and the Maryland National Guard was giving out COVID, the first COVID vaccinations, and I was driving there from Bethesda, where I live, not far from AU, and it was hour and a quarter, I can't remember. It was long, okay? So I can imagine it being even longer from Northern Virginia. You know, it's not going to hurt. For anything in Maryland, I wouldn't worry about Hyattsville. If you're applying in Northern Virginia, maybe you want to list AU's address. You know, that's an educated guess on my part. Does personal email work better than school email? It doesn't matter at all. Okay. What kind of analytical skills are they looking for specifically? Depends on what you're applying for. Okay. The most common analytical skills are data analytics. All right. The fundamental data analytics platforms, I should say, are SPSS and Stata. The more advanced platforms, which really get an employer's attention, are R, that is the letter capital R, or Python, which actually generally is used more outside of universities than R is. Okay. What other kind of analytic skills? Well, you know, general policy analysis. Or if you're in a field that is scientific, you know, certain kinds of scientific analysis, whether it's chemistry or physics or biology or whatever it is you're getting a graduate degree in the hard science area, if you're studying hard science. So what kind of, okay, what else? I think that was the last question. Well, I don't mean the last question, but the only other questions. I've answered all the rest. So this is it. All right, I'm going to move on to another slide. If you've got questions about how this should look, I'm not saying you should always have a professional skills profile at the top, but I will tell you that, I mean, let me give you an example. I dealt with a graduate student recently who had very little, in fact, had no relevant job or internship experience, just jobs at places like CVS or Starbucks and, you know, IHOP, you know, things like that. Okay. So what I had them do was put their education at the top, important that the master's degree be up there and the undergraduate degree below that, and then a really solid relevant coursework section. Okay. Now, in the case of this person, they didn't have enough in terms of a skills profile to really put that at the top. So I told them to put it underneath relevant coursework. And we came up with a few things like research and analytical skills, written and oral communication. And by the way, two other things in that, remember that study I told you about, the Chronicle of Higher Education? Beneath, just below research and analytical skills and written and oral communication, employers look for experienced people have had with multitasking, detail management. Okay. They want to know, detail management is another way of saying well organized, but it's a more sophisticated way of saying you're well organized. Okay. And experience working under deadline pressure, obviously, is something that a lot of employers, not all, but a lot of employers will value. So those are a couple of other more generic skills that you could think about putting into a skills profile. How long should a skills profile be? Not a lot longer than what you're looking at here on the screen. Maybe a couple of other bullet points so that, I mean, she has 5 and 4. Maybe a couple of others. Maybe you might have 12. But the problem with going a lot longer on the skills profile is it begins to take over the whole resume. And you don't really want to do that. All right. It becomes, it's a matter of diminishing returns in terms of how many skills you're going to list. All right. And so what have we got here? Sounds kind of like me. I don't know what you mean by that, but we're going to keep going now. Reject the tyranny of reverse chronology. You do not have to list your most recent job like tending bar, at the top of the experience section. You've got a choice. Either don't list irrelevant jobs, or if you feel it's important to show that you've always been employed and that you're a hardworking person who, you know, is working your way through grad school, or you had to do it as an undergrad, then divide the experience section into relevant experience and additional work experience below the relevant experience. And the relevant experience is going to be whatever is relevant. Depends on what you're applying for, right? And the additional work experience, mainly, you know, if you were a bartender, you know, bartender at Joe's Bar, all right, you know, in Atlanta, Georgia, and you've got the dates you work there, do you really need bullet points to explain what you did as a bartender? Or do you really need them to explain what you did as a server in a restaurant? Probably not. So it would be just a matter of listing the name of the employer, the city, and the dates, usually. On the other hand, if you worked for a retail employer and you were responsible for opening the store or closing it down at the end of the day and making sure that all the money was handled properly and all that sort of stuff, those are more important responsibilities, and maybe you would want to list a bullet pointer to describe those, okay? And so retail, nannying, dog walking, you know, generally speaking, though, keep restricted to the name of the employer, the title, and the dates, generally speaking, all right? And you could have one bullet point, particularly, you know, if you worked in retail, provided excellent customer service, something to that effect, all right? Any other skills? Anything else here? All right, let's keep going. Leadership is a word that's left over from high school. When they told everybody that you all had to be leaders, think about that for a minute. What a stupid idea that is, because we can't all be a world or a nation of leaders. That's where the campus and community service section comes into play that I mentioned before. Think twice about listing your interests or your hobbies, because you know what? Employers mainly don't care. And where are you going to list those hobbies? Let's say lobbies. Those hobbies, you're going to list them way at the bottom of the resume. Put yourself in the position of the person reading the resume at 100 miles an hour. Do they really care about reading your interests way at the bottom of the resume? The answer is no. So unless there's something about it, like, you know, you won a silver medal in the last Olympics in swimming, and so you're a swim coach. I mean, other than stuff like that, I just something really remarkable. You know, if you're a stamp collector or whatever, I just wouldn't I wouldn't bother with it at the bottom of the resume. But if you're going to put it anywhere, it's going to go at the bottom. All right, and understand that it's probably not going to be read. I mean, I've seen so many resumes where people, and it seems mostly men do this. They talk about something about frisbee competition, ultimate frisbee, or something to that effect. And again, maybe I'm not making fun of it. I'm sure it's important to you if you're an ultimate frisbee person, but employers just don't care by and large. Okay. So applicant tracking systems. What am I talking about? Short, you know, abbreviation ATS. These are employer databases. So you see a job posting and it says, instead of saying, send a resume to and attach a resume and a cover letter to this email address, it says, click here to apply. So you click and you find yourself inside an employer's system. And the first thing that happens is they'll want, even though you're going to upload your resume, they'll usually want you to fill in some fields with your name and your address and your contact information, okay? Then what can happen, a lot of the time, not necessarily all the time, is that they ask you a brief series of questions. Do you have 2 years experience doing X? And the choices are, A, I do it as a current part of my of a job I'm doing. B, I did it in a previous job. C, never did it in the job, but I have academic knowledge of this subject. And D, I don't know nothing about this. Okay. They're looking mostly for you to answer A or B. These are known as filtering questions. They are designed to filter you out, okay? Because if they want somebody with 2 years experience doing some, a particular thing, and you don't have that, and you answer no, then probably a message is going to pop up that says, thank you very much for considering us, and we hope you will look for other openings in the future, or something to that effect. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt when you're answering those questions, but not to the extent of just saying that you've got 2 years experience at something when you have no years experience at something, okay? And now, what else are we talking about here? They will tell you to upload your resume and a cover letter into the system. What is really important is the resume, because the resume in an applicant tracking system is going to be evaluated by, not by people, but by algorithms, okay? And the applicant tracking system's been told to look for certain keywords and phrases, okay? And what you want to do before you upload your resume is look in the required or mandatory qualification section of the job posting, as well as the preferred qualification section, and figure out what are those words and phrases they're looking for. It's not that hard, okay? Typically, they're looking for somewhere between 5 and a dozen keywords and phrases. So you want to look at what it is they're looking for, and then you look at your resume, and you say to yourself, assuming that your experience and your academic work is relevant to those, to most at least, of those keywords and phrases, you want to pump up your use of them in the resume. And let me give you an example. Let's say the job description says they want somebody with advanced Excel skills, and let's say you have advanced Excel skills. Then if at all possible, in the 3 jobs or internships you've got listed, if it's true, you should say in a bullet point, position required regular use of advanced Excel skills. Position required daily use of advanced Excel skills. And repeat it 3 times. Why? Because the algorithms are just counting your use of the phrase advanced Excel, something to that effect. That's a very simple and often really probably overly simplistic example of how those algorithms work. But it's a counting exercise on the part of the algorithms. The algorithms may also be told to give certain words and phrases more weight than others, but it's going to be very hard for you to figure that out. I wouldn't try to do that. I would just try to pump up my resume with words and phrases that you're seeing in the mandatory and preferred qualification section of the job posting. All right. That will tend to raise your score. All right. And generally speaking, the score you will get in these systems is anywhere from 1 star to 5 star, 5 star being the best. I know from reading the literature on this, that people generally don't get through to the next round, which means they get an interview, unless you're at least a 4-star candidate. Now, that may sound prohibitively high. It might not be. I'm just saying that you've got to basically be a 4-star candidate. So the algorithms need to see those words and phrases from the job description if they at all match your skill set or your experience. All right. And what's your objective is typically in these systems, an HR person will order the system after they've gotten, say, 100 applicants, let's say, or 500 applicants, whatever. Give me the 50 or 20 best candidates, meaning the ones with the highest scores, all right? Because they don't want to look at more than that. So basically, they're letting the algorithms do a significant amount of evaluation of, the large number of candidates, narrowing it down to 15 or 20, maybe even a dozen, and then a human being or a panel of human beings will look at those 15 or 20 and decide who gets interviewed. Now, what happens with the interviews? A couple different things. Larger employers, and especially private sector employers, will often do phone interviews first, typically 15 to 20 minutes, very basic, almost always conducted by an HR person. And they're just they're judging a little bit how articulate you are. And they're also judging whether you're still interested in the job and if they had any questions about your resume that puzzled them for some reason, okay? Then you get through that, and then you typically will get a Zoom or Microsoft Teams interview. I would say the feedback I'm getting from students and recent alumni ever since the pandemic, but even in the past year and a half or so, when the pandemic has faded away as an issue, I would say 95% of interviewing is still done online, video interviewing we're talking about. So you want to be good at doing that over Zoom or over Teams, okay? And they may or may not. If it's a remote position, they might not even care about interviewing you in person. A lot of employers for a final round, which might well be just you, if you're the last candidate standing, going in and meeting people in person, okay? Any other, yeah, we got more questions here. My last 3 jobs were teaching. However, I did more and had more leadership positions at the school I was employed at. Would it be fine to list that school first, although the jobs after that were also teaching, but with fewer duties? Yes, absolutely. I'm pretty sure I understand what you're saying, because it's a lot like some resumes of teachers who want to change careers that I have looked at, particularly when you've been the chair of a department, or you were responsible for certain kinds of student evaluations that were broader than just the students you were teaching, and various other things. What if you have volunteer experience that is actually relevant? Should you put it under the relevant experience? Yes, you should. And don't say that it was voluntary. Just say, worked for this place, whatever the name of the employer was in the city, and list your responsibilities. If it's voluntary, I wouldn't list 5 bullet points. I'd probably list 1 or 2. And under questioning, you could say, well, this was a volunteer position, but boy, I really put a lot of work into this, and I felt strongly that I should list it under my relevant experience, because it is experience, okay? Experience doesn't mean paid experience exclusively, all right? So give yourself a break, is what I'm saying here. Let's keep going. Is this the last slide? I think it is. This is sort of what applicant tracking systems are all about. And be ready to justify everything on your resume, like this guy who got thrown out of Congress finally, and apparently lied about virtually everything on his resume. But again, people I have found personally in terms of job interviewing I've done over the years, and I've done very little over the last decade, in fact, none, so I'm not looking for a job. But be ready for someone to pick the 3rd bullet point of your 4th most recent job, so way at the bottom of the resume, or maybe on the 2nd page, and say, I was wondering about what you said about how you worked on this kind of a project. Can you expand upon that? And you're thinking to yourself, are you kidding me? That's a job I did 5 years ago, and you think this is the most important thing you want to ask me. Now, you're thinking this, you're not saying it, but you got to smile and just answer. So be ready to justify everything on the resume, all right? Because there are certain questions you can anticipate, okay? Tell me about yourself as a first question. Why do you want to work for us? Why are you interested in this job or internship? What do you think are your main strengths for this position? What do you think the most significant challenges would be for you, which is a polite way of saying weaknesses, entering this position? Those tend to be the most, oh yeah, and where do you hope to be in 3 years? Or where do you hope to be after you graduate? Those are the 5 or 6 most often asked questions in a conventional interview, okay? And I think there's one more slide here. Yeah, upcoming events. Please note that I don't know what O opportunities are. I just realized I have no idea. How to network. There's an event prior to a networking reception on February 20th. There's going to be a networking reception that is not listed here that would be important for you. Most of you, if you're seniors and considering law school, and I think very few of you on this presentation are, there's going to be a webinar. No, there's going to be an in-person session in Butler Boardroom, 6th floor, on Feb 21. And the spring 2024 job and internship fair, unfortunately, it's going to be virtual because apparently Vendor Arena, where we normally have it, is under major reconstruction. And we can't have it there right now. So we do have a lot of experience with virtual job fairs, which is what we did during the pandemic. And they were pretty useful. But what you want to do is register for it soon. And you want to check on it every few days, because employers who are going to be there will say, okay, we're going to do a session for a maximum of 20 students, and that you will be able to log into, and it'll be first come, first serve in terms of who registers for it. So you want to be monitoring that even after you've registered for the job and internship fair in late March, okay? Wish it were in person, because it's a lot better in person, but if you're an online student, it's a lot better for you that it's going to be virtual. Now, is the job fair worthwhile for those not looking for entry-level positions? Maybe. And how can you tell? There's going to be a list of the employers who will be there and the kind of jobs they are hiring for. So if they say undergraduates only, then probably you don't want to go look for those particular employers. But if there are, let's say there's 3 employers there for whom you'd really like to work, and it might be useful for you to try to reach out to them during the job fair and say, I'm looking for, I have 5 years of experience, so I'm not entry level, and I'm interested in this kind of a job with your agency or your organization or your company. What are the prospects for something like that? So there's no harm in asking, all right? And the one thing about a virtual job fair is you don't have to come to campus for it, unless you're coming anyway for a class that day, later on that day. So that's that. Have I skipped anything? I don't think so. So yeah, I'm done. If you are an SPA graduate student, you can make an appointment with me via handshake, or if you're an SPA senior, you also can. If you are not SPA, you cannot make an appointment with me, because I have to limit my work somehow, some way. There's an SIS Career Center, there's a COGAD Career Center, the main AU Career Center, of which I am part, handles school communications and the College of Arts and Sciences, as well as School of Public Affairs. Somehow I think I'm skipping a school there, but maybe not. Anyway, yeah, all the schools are covered one way or another, either with your own career center or with the main career center. And in the main AU Career Center, there are advisors specifically assigned to specific schools, such as me being assigned to SBA graduate students and some seniors, as well as recent alumni up to about 18 months to 2 years out from graduation. So I don't see any more questions. Therefore, I'm going to stop and wish you all good luck, and have a good evening.